around the same time, a law professor from the University of Chicago called for an armed coup to overthrow the president of the United States, but that didn't get a lot of press because it didn't seem particularly newsworthy under the circumstances.
Brian Leiter. What a piece of shit. I haven't heard his name for around 10 years. Since Tucker Carlson called him out yesterday, and I doubt that many of you know who this moron is, I figured this would be a good story time moment. So right now, I recommend you get comfortable. Perhaps grab a snack or something to drink. It's time to go over the deep lore of Professor Brian Leiter.
Were you trying to get crazy with this, eh? Don't you know I'm loco?
You hear me? I'm not insane! This is not reality, not reality, not reality.
This is reality.
Not reality, reality. Relax, buddy. You're awake now. Insane in the membrane.
Brian Leiter is and has been for many years now a law professor employed at a prestigious law school. He is someone you would normally expect to have pretty thick skin. After all, he has a job that's pretty hard to get. You know, the type of job that doesn't really require much in terms of hard work, yet despite that it pays extremely well. Now, in terms of law schools, what ranking a law school has is considered very important. These law schools will go to amazing lengths to manipulate their law school rankings. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that these rankings are stupid, misleading, and don't accurately reflect the quality of these schools. That being said, this doesn't stop the law schools from obsessing over them. At least back when I cared about such things, the only ranking anyone truly cared about was the US News and World Report rankings. Back then, law schools would fall into one of 4 categories. The best law schools were the top 14. Why 14? I have no fucking idea. It seems like a bizarre number to use as a cutoff, but that's what it was. It was a big deal for a law school to make it into the top 14. Now, if a law school was not in the top 14, but it was in the top 50, then that law school would be considered a first-tier law school. If the school made the rankings between 50 and 100, it was considered a second-tier law school. Any other school would be considered a TTT, a third-tier toilet. Back at that time, which is probably still true today, the TTTs consisted of a ton of grifter law schools. These law schools were either full-blown scams or sat on the border of being fraudulent. Your chances of actually passing the bar or ever becoming a lawyer going to one of these schools was absolutely abysmal. A common tactic that these 3T law schools would engage in would be to try and misrepresent where their standings were in the rankings. One of the most notorious schools to do this was the Thomas Cooley School of Law. You see, Thomas Cooley created its own law school ranking. It weighted things that were completely ridiculous, like the square footage of the school's library. Of course, this benefited Thomas Cooley, which had built itself an enormous library. This allowed the school to consistently appear as a top-ranked law school in its own made-up rankings. Back in the day, Brian Leiter was a professor with the UT Austin School of Law. This law school was pretty consistently ranked in the top 20 of law schools. In a good year, it had the potential to possibly make it into the top 14. Being a professor at a school like this would be a major professional accomplishment. Apparently, though, making $400,000 a year, working less than 10 hours a week, was not good enough for Brian Leiter. He needed everyone to recognize just how important of a man he was. So Brian Leiter did the exact same thing that the Thomas Cooley Law School did. He made up his own law school rankings to exaggerate the rank of the law school that he worked at. Now, Thomas Cooley doing this made sense. The school was basically a massive scam. But for someone who already worked at a prestigious law school to do this was absolute cringe. Enter the auto-admit message board. This message board was basically 4chan for wannabe lawyers. It called itself the most prestigious admissions board in the world, and it was infamous for its lack of moderation and surplus of edgy content. Now, I confirm that this message board still exists. I haven't visited it though in many, many years, so I don't really have any recent information to provide you on that front. Anyways, responding to Brian Leiter's cringe law school rankings, the administrator of AutoAdmit posted a rebuttal study which debunked Leiter's rankings. This led Leiter to respond like a typical leftist would. He called the message board racist, sexist, homophobic, and demanded it be deplatformed. Leiter did so by posting an outraged blog post where he said the following about the message board. There appear to be, for example, roughly 250 threads with the word blank in the subject line. Double that number if you include blacks, including an average of 1 or 2 such threads every single day for the last couple of months. Contrast that with a mere 150 threads discussing UCLA and only 100 plus on clerkships in Georgetown, all topics one might have expected to command as much or more attention on a pre-law discussion board than racist abuse. There are, in addition, some 350 threads about Jews, and while some are benign, the majority appear to be of the variety, are Jews smarter or just craftier? And did blank bitches give blanks in Auschwitz for the protein? The latter of which introduces another feature of the site, perhaps even more prevalent than the racism and the anti-blank. It's vulgar and abusive sexism. Evident, for example, in the more than 300 threads about bitches and another 300 with blank in the subject line. Not to mention dozens of links to pornographic websites. This just scratches the surface on the sexist abuse on the site, as a perusal of a single day's thread will reveal. And the racism, anti-blank, and sexism wouldn't be complete, of course, without abusive remarks about homosexual men, as in the 200 plus threads about blanks. Brian Leiter made a fatal mistake with this post. By indicating what words he searched for on the message board, he allowed the administrator of the website to identify his IP address by cross-referencing the words that were searched. AutoAdmit posted a response prominently on the front page of the message board. It was called, "Why Dr. Brian Leiter Hates Us." In addition to this embarrassing photo of Leiter, it describes the controversy and reveals that AutoAdmit had identified Leiter's IP address based on the search terms listed in the blog post. The article indicates the same IP address routinely clicked on message boards with Hot or Not website links to UT Austin law students. This same IP address frequented threads about D-tier grifter celebrity Paris Hilton, and of course message board threads about Leiter himself. Now, in addition to bullshit law school rankings, Brian Leiter's academic specialty was the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. This, of course, is perhaps the most useless type of expertise that a law school professor could possibly have. Brian Leiter's obsession with ranking himself compared to other people, combined with his obnoxious left-wing politics, inevitably led to his constant involvement in internet drama. Imagine if Vosh was a law school professor, and that's basically what Brian Leiter is. Probably the most infamous example of this is Brian Leiter's several years long juvenile internet feud with Dr. Keith Burgess-Jackson, a professor from the University of Texas, Arlington. Dr. Keith Burgess-Jackson was also a law professor who specialized in philosophy and ran a popular blog called Anal Philosophy. Of course, Leiter, a man obsessed with smelling his own farts, could not stand for this. Leiter called out Dr. Burgess-Jackson for being a right-wing creep. He accused him of gaining inflated traffic to his blog from people Google searching anal sex porn. Dr. Keith Burgess-Jackson responded to Leiter's provocations by starting a new anti-Leiter blog called Brian Leiter Academic Thug. For years, Dr. Burgess-Jackson provided weekly insights into all of the petty bullshit and internet beefs that Brian Leiter got himself involved in. Sadly, the Brian Leiter Academic Thug blog is no longer online. This other blog preserves the fact that Brian Leiter would try to throw his weight around as a law school professor to try and deplatform Dr. Burgess-Jackson. Dear Mr. Lanson, I am writing to put you and your company, American Power Blogs Inc., on notice that a user of your service, Power Blogs, has engaged in tortious misappropriation of my name in order to advertise and draw attention to his website. Keith Burgess-Jackson, who runs the site in question, has not received my permission to register my name or any variation of my name, or to otherwise utilize my name or any variation of my name in order to promote or otherwise identify his site. Please close down this particular URL immediately. Very truly yours, Brian Leiter, Joseph D. Jamail, Centennial Chair in Law, Professor of Philosophy and Director of Law and Philosophy Program, University of Texas, Austin. In 2014, 600 philosophers signed a petition to ban Brian Leiter's self-serving bullshit law school rankings. As a result, begrudgingly, Leiter stepped down from his position as the editor of the rankings and filed a nonsense lawsuit against these philosophers who called out his cringe law school rankings. Now, yesterday, Tucker Carlson called out Brian Leiter to his audience of millions of people and revealed his disgusting face to them. You see, a few days ago, Brian Leiter posted a blog post asking for the military to conduct a coup against President Trump. Brian Leiter hoped to replace our democratic republic with a Latin American-style fascist military junta government. Leiter has since tried to sweep all of this up by deleting the blog post from his blog. But it was too late. The post has been archived. Of course, calling for a military dictatorship would constitute the crime of treason. I call on President Trump to see to it that Brian Leiter is prosecuted for betraying our democratic republic and then later obstructing justice by trying to cover up his crime. It's time to put this goblin of a man in the dungeon he so desperately deserves. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this deep lore. Please support small YouTube channels like mine by subscribing. Thank you.